Safer Future Communities is a wide network and partnership of organisations, all from the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, working on a range of issues, but all ultimately working to ensure that communities are a safer place.
The voluntary community and social enterprise sector is made up of a diverse range of independent organisations. It includes small, unstaffed community groups and large national organisations. We're here to support commissioners to cut crime, keep communities safe and support victims.
I think the VCSE sector across a whole range of public services is simply the most efficient, the best value and the most effective provider of those services.
The police are very good at responding to a crisis, but we're less good at following it through and solving the problem, and that's where the VCSE sector can add a lot of value in solving the problems in the community.
So what are the problems we're looking at? We work to address a range of issues in local communities. These include violence against women and girls, drugs and alcohol abuse, homelessness, equality and diversity, young people and victims, with a view to reducing crime and reoffending, antisocial behaviour and hate crime. VCSE organisations will often work across several of these areas, reflecting the fact that individuals sometimes have multiple and complex needs. The Minerva Project is a VCSE organisation based in Hull. Minerva works with offenders leaving prison and helps them to get back on the right track so they don't reoffend.
It was about the passion of saying, well, been 30 years as a police officer and I started arresting the children of the people I arrested the first time, so that clearly wasn't working. I had to do something different.
Let's have a look at the areas in which Minerva works and see how those areas can impact upon one another. Looking at reoffending, we know that 60% of offenders with no qualifications were reconvicted compared to 45% with qualifications. 97% of offenders have expressed a desire to stop their offending behaviour. When asked, the most important factors were having a job and having a place to live. Ex-prisoners who are homeless upon release are twice as likely to reoffend as those with stable accommodation. Stable housing can reduce reoffending among young people by 20%. In a ComRes survey in November 2011, the message on antisocial behaviour was clear. 71% of respondents said it should be a key priority for the newly elected PCC to tackle in their local area. A good example of a scheme looking at antisocial behaviour is the Shires Project. In this Minerva scheme, funded by the Community Action Against Crime Innovation Fund, volunteers and staff are building and installing alley gates in crime-prone areas of the city. The project is being led by David Lawson, himself an ex-offender who came through the Minerva programme.
There was a lot of fly tipping going on and the alleyways was getting used for selling drugs and people was hanging around and some of the residents was getting frightened. And so basically it was to clean the area up and to make it more secure. We made the gates here, we send them to the powder coaters and then we install them, fit locks and also give keys out to the residents who have access to the alleyways. Well, I believe the benefits from the scheme ripples out from the community to the residents, to the council, to people who are learning new skills.
We've worked with over 800 ex-offenders here. Now, usually, nationally and locally, 62% of those would have gone back to prison within 12 weeks. I'm pleased to say that we've only had 104 go back. So our recidivism rate for this area now is something like 15 to 16%.
It's changed my life. The support I was given from the beginning and all the way through, from housing to relationships, to money management, to taking responsibility for myself.
Another important part of the Safer Future Communities project is its work with young people. Young adults make up only 10% of the population, but account for a third of all crime. They also have the highest risk of victimisation and are twice as likely to become victims as 55 to 64-year-olds.
Through Safer Future Communities, the partner that we work with, the National Council for Voluntary Youth Services, have worked with a group of young people from across the country to develop a youth charter for the PCCs. Obviously, young people don't have the right to vote. So as a group who are disproportionately affected by crime issues, both as victims and as offenders, they nonetheless have less voice in the election of the police and crime commissioners. So it was felt really important to ensure that their voice was heard. And through the Youth Charter, we've done that, and approximately half of the PCCs signed up to that Youth Charter.
We were approached by Disability Wales a couple of years ago. They had come across something called the Innovation Fund from the UK Home Office, and they wanted to put in an application to tackle disability hate crime for a project that would look at tackling disability hate crime.
I've already made up my mind. I'm not going to like you.
The play's being taken into schools for year 9 pupils, and we're trying to educate them about disability hate crime, as in the awareness of it and what you can do if you're a victim or even if you witness it.
Hey Alice, I've got an idea. How about you beg?
Spastic is one of the words that's used in the piece, and because it's associated with my personal disability, which is cerebral palsy, I then give them a brief description of the origin of the word, and you see their eyes light up going, oh my, I didn't realise, I just thought it was one of those words that was generally used in everyday speech, and everybody does it.
As far as I'm concerned, having worked in this environment, I haven't seen a better way of tackling issues.
Disability Wales's work spans several important areas, including equality, diversity and hate crime, young people and victims. At least 1 in 5 people have been a victim of crime, although perceived likelihood of victimisation is 5 times higher than the actual risk.
Victim Support's been working for over 35 years supporting victims and witnesses. There are other specialist organisations dealing with domestic abuse, sexual violence, hate crimes, a whole range of services to victims and witnesses. But primarily, I think, working together and making sure that the voice of victims and witnesses, which can often go unheard, is actually kept right at the top of the priority list for other criminal justice agencies and indeed for government and in future for police and crime commissioners who will be responsible for commissioning the services that so many people badly need.
The last 2 areas we'll look at are violence against women and girls and drug and alcohol misuse. Domestic violence has the highest repeat victimisation rate of any violent crime and accounts for 1 in 6 incidents of violence. Up to 6,500 girls are at risk of female genital mutilation every year. The economic cost of violence against women and girls in the UK is estimated to be £37.6 billion annually.
From the evidence and the work of our members, what we know is that it is those women's organisations who've developed practice over decades who actually work best with survivors, but also have the remedies and the solutions for decision makers to move forward. It's not only a moral issue and an equalities issue, it's actually a business issue that it makes good sense to invest in women's organisations, because in the long run they save the state money, but they also enable women to take charge of their lives, to recover from trauma and to eventually become economically independent and pay taxes.
Finally, we have drug and alcohol misuse. Problematic drug users are responsible for up to 50% of all acquisitive crime in England. Those who stay in treatment for 6 months to 2 years show a reduction in offending of 48%. Every £1 invested in drug treatment saves £2.50 in subsequent costs to taxpayers, primarily by reducing crime.
You know, many people might not recognise the drug service that's working in their community, but they'd notice very quickly if those services disappeared, and they'd notice that in terms of a whole variety of negative impacts. We know, for example, that those drug treatment services prevent about 5 million crimes every year, and that's well evidenced.
We're able to work with clients to get their treatment needs met, but at the same time explicitly challenge their pro-criminal beliefs and their offending behaviour as being part of a bigger problem and something which causes harm to them, but also to their families and to their communities.
Just for drug crimes, the cost of drug-related offending in England is about £14 billion a year.
The last and perhaps most important part of the project is the networks themselves.
The main objectives of the Safe Future Communities project are to support voluntary sector networks in each of the PCC areas so that those networks can speak with a stronger collective voice about the needs of their organisations, but more importantly, their service users and the communities they work with, and inform the PCC of those needs from the local community.
What we want often is just one point of contact. It makes our lives a lot easier to just deal with one council, to just deal with one organisation. And of course, the VCSE sector is extraordinarily complex, and so a network, an ability to talk to a grouping and help them shape our thinking is really important.
Many of the Safer Future Communities networks across the country are part of what's called transition groups that are working alongside their Police and Crime Commissioner offices to influence and share their experiences so that when they start the commissioning process, they will have had an opportunity as Safer Future Communities networks in themselves to influence how that work is commissioned.
Now is the time for the networks to start pushing at those doors that are slightly ajar. To use a police analogy, they've got to kick the door in and go in and then enter the room.
The concept of a network on this agenda is not a new one, but it's just enabled us to have a look again, I guess, and refocus the work that we do for the benefit of the areas that we represent.
Most important things, I would really regret or be concerned if the network's withered on the vine now.
Here in the VCSE sector, we know what works. We have the right relationships and we involve local people in change. We represent groups outside the mainstream and we provide excellent value for money. As the police and crime commissioners look toward their future direction, we're here to work with them to cut crime, make communities safe, support victims and provide the clearest way forward.